Amen. So great story or great end, I guess, to the story of Joseph here in Genesis chapter 45. So you're going to keep your place there. We're not going to get there until towards the end of the sermon. But this morning we're going to talk about a topic that I feel very strongly about. We're going to talk about kind of a mindset that you need to have in your life and that many people struggle to find. The title of the sermon is Lemons or Lemonade. Lemons or lemonade. So you're going to keep your place in Genesis 45, and we're going to come back there in a few minutes. So as I tell you to leave there, just bookmark that if you would. But tonight, or this morning, we're going to be talking about lemons or lemonade is the title of this sermon. We're going to talk about finding victory in defeat. We're going to talk about how you can find positive situations in seemingly negative circumstances. And there is a specific method to this, and the Bible talks about this a lot. But I want to give you, before we even get into how to do this, there's a couple prerequisites that we have to look at. Prerequisites meaning things that you need to understand and you need to apply before you have a chance of being successful at this. All right, so what am I talking about? Lemons or lemonade? You know, there's that famous saying, of course, you know, that you can make lemonade, take lemons and make lemonade. That's basically an analogy of someone who takes a bad situation and is able to make it into a positive result. All right, lemons being something that's if you ever get a car that's a lemon, right? A car that's a lemon, there's actually a lemon law, right, on cars, whereas, it's defective. Something's wrong with it. It's not good, okay? So, something being a lemon is considered something that's broken, deficient, negative, right? And somebody that can make lemonade out of that, that's a good thing out of a negative situation. So that's what I want to show you this morning. I want to show you how to, and look, this is something that you need to write down this morning. This is something that you need to think about. This is a mindset, all right? If you listen to this sermon this morning and then you forget what I talked about before you hit the door on your way out of church this morning, this is going to do you no good. I mean, I could say that about any sermon, but this is really a mindset this morning that you need to apply. And let me tell you something, it is a mindset that is missed by most people. Most people are not able to do what I am going to tell you this morning. All right? So the first thing I want to give you in your path, in the lesson, in the methodology this morning, on turning negative situations into positive situations is I first need to give you two biblical concepts on how to think about things, okay? The first one is this, all right? It's really I need to give you these two concepts on your attitude. So I need to fix your attitude before I can even begin to preach at you about this topic of turning lemons into lemonade, all right? So let's fix your attitude right away this morning. You're going to keep your place in Genesis 45, and you're going to turn your Bibles to Esther chapter number 4. I'm going to give you two things that you need to correct, that you need to make sure are right about your attitude before you even have a chance of turning lemons into lemonade. A prerequisite means you can't even do this class. You wouldn't even know how to do the methods in this class until you've taken these other two classes. So these are two prerequisites that you need to have fixed with your attitude before we can even talk about the chance of turning negative things into positive things. The first thing is this. You need to do the right thing. You need to learn to do the right thing, whether your situation be good or it be bad. Look at Esther chapter number 4. Many people struggle with this, all right? Look at Esther chapter number 4 and look at verse number 13. So Esther is in this terrible situation where her people are about to be killed, and she is being implored to go into the king, who is her husband, by the way, and tell him about this situation. The problem is that if you go in unannounced to the king, there is a chance that he is going to execute you, all right? This is talk about a power trip, right? If you don't make an appointment with the king, even if it's your husband, if he doesn't give his scepter to you, she could be executed. And she knows going in unannounced without a prior appointment could cost her her life. And this was a very real thing, a very real fear, all right? Meaning, this has likely happened to other people in the past, all right? Look at verse number 13. It says, then Mordecai, look, Esther didn't want to do it for this reason. She was fearful. All right, then Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. He's saying, look, you're a Jew as well, and if this decree to execute all the Jews goes out, he's like, that includes you. Look at verse 14. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, again, this is Mordecai, imploring Esther to do the right thing here, to use her position, then there shall be enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And then he kind of plants this seed with her, saying, hey, this might be why you are in the position that you are actually in. You don't know that now, but it could be why you're in that position. And that's an important kind of concept to understand in your life, okay? When something negative is going on in your life or something positive is going on in your life, especially in the negative times and the valleys in your life, you don't know why that's happening, all right? And look, you kind of have to just tell yourself, I don't need to know why that's happening. You just need to do the right thing no matter what the circumstances, and that's the lesson here. Look at verse 15. Then Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer. So she gets this message, this incredibly, edifying message. It's not too many times that somebody will give you, just really good, edifying advice to do the right thing in a hard situation, right? Verse 16. Go gather together all the Jews, this is Esther's response, that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai, kind of implores her. Mordecai gives a very sharpening message to Esther, and then she actually does the right thing. But let me just say something as far as Mordecai goes. What does he tell her to do? Mordecai, and look, he never gets any credit in the story, but what does he tell her to do? He tells her, just do the right thing. Regardless of, the possible consequences upon yourself. And as a pastor, I can really relate to this because many times if I have somebody that comes to me and asks me, what should I do in this situation? Many times doing the right thing does not seem obviously to be the best thing for that person at that moment. So many times you are telling somebody, hey, I know it would be easier for you to go this route. I know it'd be easier, maybe, it'd be easier for the finances of your household to send your wife to work or whatever. But to tell somebody to just do the right thing, even though from the world's eyes it may seem like it's a negative thing for you, that doesn't mean that you should not still have to do the right thing. So Mordecai is not really delivering a message that Esther really wants to hear. He's not saying, hey, you know what Esther wants to hear? You know what people want to hear? You know what they want to hear? Do the thing that's safest for you. Do the thing that seems best for you immediately in the moment. Esther, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that, this wicked Haman is going to kill all these people. Just be silent about it. If you go and talk to the king, that could cost you your life. Look, that's what we as people, that's what we want to hear. We want to hear the safest, the easiest road possible presented to us. But look, that's not the right road. And what Mordecai told Esther to do, you know what he said? He said, do the right thing. No matter what. If the consequences are negative, if the consequences are positive, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't do the right thing. So that's the first thing that you need to fix about your attitude, that you need to set in your attitude, is that it doesn't matter what your circumstances are. You need to do what the Bible says about these circumstances, whether that be immediately good for you or bad for you. Just do the right thing and let the chips fall where they may. A good example of this, and I don't want to get too deep in it because we're going to talk about it tonight, but this is why the Bible, when it talks about the husband's role and the wife's role in the family, in the marriage, those things are not dependent on each other. The Bible never says, husbands, love your wives as long as she's submitting perfectly to you. The Bible never says, wives, submit thyself to thy husband as long as he's being a good leader. No, that is never in the command at all. The Bible is just saying, do the right thing. Love your wives, submit to your husbands, reverence your husbands, sacrifice for your wives. The Bible tells you, do your role no matter what. And that's the first thing that you need to understand, is that we need, in our Christian lives, we need to be able to do the right thing no matter what the immediate consequences. Look, nobody, and this is a kind of another main theme in the sermon this morning, if somebody else, the way they act, or the way they are going to act, or my perception of what they are going to do. What was Esther's perception of her own husband here? That it's possible that he may kill her if she goes in and talks to him about this issue. But what would she have been doing in that case? She would have been giving, power away that she had. If the way you act is dependent on the way somebody else acts, you are literally releasing control from yourself to somebody else on how you act. But guess who's responsible for how you act? It's you. So you're responsible for what you do, yet you are giving that power to someone. You're giving away that power of something that you should, your control over your actions, that is your wheelhouse. And you should not be giving away that to somebody to get you to do the wrong thing. You should be doing the right thing no matter what, whether it be negative or positive. But, it's when things are considered to be negative, that's when people start looking for a way out. They start looking for reasons to not do the right thing. But the point is this, all right? The point is just, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is another perfect example. They're just like, hey, we're not going to do this. We're not going to worship this idol, and it may be that God saves us. They didn't say we know for sure that God's going to save us from the furnace. They just said, hey, our God can save us. We know He can. I don't know if He's going to. But either way, we're not worshiping the idol. We're going to do the right thing no matter what, even though it may be that God doesn't save us. It may be that we perish. Same thing with Esther. She came to the right conclusion. She's just like, I'm going to do the right thing. And if I perish, I perish. So the first point this morning on the prerequisite on how to turn negative things into positive things, or a better way of putting this is how to find the positive in the negative, is to do the right thing no matter what the consequences to you. All right? But look, make sure you are right. Make sure you are right. Well, how do I know if I'm right? Well, you know you're right by knowing the Bible, by filtering it through God's words. Not your opinions, not your emotions, not how you feel that day, by what the Word of God says. So the first point is, do the right thing no matter what. You say, that's simple. It is simple. But it may be simple to think about, simple to, want to do, but where it gets hard is actually applying it in your life. All right? Turn to Job chapter number 1. Let's look at the second prerequisite to pulling positive out of the negative. Look at Job chapter number 1. Job, of course, a very famous story in the Bible about a man that loses everything in one day. He loses everything, he loses all his wealth, he loses all his family, he loses his children in one day. We can't even imagine what that would be like to go through something like that. If you even have that, just go through that thought experiment in your head, if you've ever done that, it would be devastating for anyone. But look down at Job chapter number 1 and look at verse number 21. The Bible says, this is what Job says. After he has gone through this day where he's lost all his children, lost all his wealth, lost all his sheep, he's lost everything. What does he say? Think about that for a second. You work for 40 years, you build a business, you build whatever it is that you build, you support your family, you raise your children have children. You've worked so hard and you've done the right thing. The Bible says that Job was a righteous man. Not being perfect, but just that he He was doing God's will in his life. And all of a sudden, it's all taken away from you in one day. Your entire family is killed. All your business is destroyed. All your servants are gone. All your employees are gone. Everything's just gone. What would your attitude be at that point? I think all of us would struggle at that point. But look at verse number 21. This is Job's attitude. This is Job's attitude. Verse 21, it says, naked came I out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return thither. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job sinned not, nor charged God foolishly. Meaning, if you would have been that person that lost everything after decades, you've just done nothing but serve the Lord your whole life, and God just decided to take it all away, and you would say, you would be mad at God. You would be wrong. And you would charge God, meaning you would blame God. Even in a fit of rage and sorrow, after losing your family, losing your children, you just break down and blame the Lord, maybe just for 5 minutes, you would still be wrong. Job did not do that. Job said, God gave me all these things. All these things, including my own family and my own children, were just gifts from God. It's Him that gave it to me. He can take it from me. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Who am I to say anything against the Lord? And look, Job was right. It's an extreme example, but Job, I was looking at George in the back there. I'm sorry, brother. Job was correct. Job was correct, but George would not be able to do that. No, I'm just kidding. I'm sorry. But none of us would be able to do that. Let's be real. Let's be real. Most of us would be a broken down mess in that situation. So the second point is this. The second point that we need to get to before we even start the sermon is that you need to destroy entitlement in your life. The first point is that you need to do the right thing no matter what. The second point is you need to destroy entitlement in your life. And this is a big, big problem today in our country. You don't deserve anything. You don't deserve anything in this world. It's a matter of fact, the opposite is what is taught today. The opposite is that you deserve everything. And look, the problem in our society, in America especially, is that people will feed you this garbage. The past election cycle that we went through. That's what politicians do. Isn't that what politicians do on both sides? They sit here and say, you don't deserve this. I'll give you more than that person can give you. You don't deserve to have all this stuff happening to you. You deserve better. You deserve all these things. And they just make all these promises to you on both sides. And that's how you get a bunch of people, a population, a nation of people that are just constantly upset over what they don't have. Right. Over what people are, and you know what that leads to? That leads to blaming other people for problems that you have. Again, what does that do? And you're going to see a common theme here. This is why an entitlement attitude will just completely ruin you. It'll ruin you as a man. It'll ruin you as a woman. Feeling like you deserve something does not make it true. Feeling like somebody owes you something, somebody owes you a living, somebody owes you comfort, somebody owes you whatever, it doesn't make it true. That's the problem. It will just make you bitter towards other people. It will make you bitter towards other things. It will make you bitter towards just the world in general. Here's the problem. Here's the problem with blaming others, and it's very similar to what we talked about with doing the right thing. The problem with blaming other people for your problems is that you remove yourself from being able to control that situation. If I blame somebody else for a problem that I'm going through, don't I remove myself from that equation? Just think about it for a second. Just think about a silly example. Say somebody invited me to, I don't even want to use myself. Say someone got invited to something, a party or whatever, some event, and they went and they did something horrible, something sinful, something they shouldn't have done. And then they blame the person that invited them. They put that blame on what they did on somebody else. And they remove themselves from that responsibility. Guess what? That person has literally no protection against future trouble. They have no protection against doing something like that again because they removed themselves from being responsible for it. So this is where entitlement leads you. Entitlement leads you to this attitude of blaming everybody else for your problems. And look, the real problem is it puts an end to the control you have over your circumstances, over your actions. I mean, it's the same thing, in a family with marriage, with children's, with a job, just life in general. And if you just lead your life in these situations as this, everybody owes me this stuff, everybody owes me a living, and anything that goes wrong is somebody else's fault, that's not going to work out for you. So the right attitude, the two items that we talked about so far is you do the right thing. You stay on track no matter what. And then the second thing is that you don't deserve anything. Realize that you don't deserve anything and take responsibility for the things that are going on in your life. All right, now let's talk about lemonade from lemons. Let's talk about, now that you know that, because you have no chance of succeeding at what we're going to talk about next if you don't get those two things right first. I want to give you a couple thought experiments this morning. All right, I want you to think about these scenarios that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about one in the Bible. Then I'm just going to give you some random, application of that just in life today. And then we'll talk about applying that to your spiritual life. But here's a thought experiment. Think about this for a second. Think about, as I say these conditions, as I say this to you, think about that this is happening to you. Think about your life, where it is right now, and then your life, these things get put onto your life. So here you are. You're in church on Sunday morning. You have a job. You have children. You have a family. You have a husband. You have a wife. Maybe you're single, whatever it is. But think about this for a minute. Think about your life is going along. Everything seems fine. And then just think about that your own family betrays you. I mean, people in your own family, your brothers, your sisters, your parents, your cousins, whoever is closest to you in your family, they betray you. But they betray you to a point where they literally sell you into servitude. They literally you would call that human trafficking today. They usually just sell you off just to make money. They completely sell you out and basically ruin your life and put you underneath the servitude of others. You literally end up in slavery. Think about that for a second. I mean, that happens today. Did you know that? Then, while you're in servitude, you get falsely accused of a terrible crime. Falsely. You didn't do it. You were just trying to be the best, make the best of your situation. You get falsely accused, and then you get thrown in prison. And just locked up in prison. I mean, you're pretty much, your life is, from the outside world's perspective, is basically ruined at this point. What would you do? What would your attitude be at that point? Turn back to Genesis chapter number 45. This is exactly what happened to Joseph. We literally have an exact example in the Bible of what I just mentioned to you. Joseph's brothers, they were envious of him. He annoyed them. They were going to kill him. And then Reuben steps in, tries to save him. And they're like, hey, we can make some money. Let's sell him into slavery. They sell him into Egypt. He goes to work for this Egyptian, this man named Potiphar. And this man's wife, comes at Joseph. And Joseph, rebukes her and rebuffs her advances. But then she falsely accuses him of, trying to harm her. And what happens to him? He gets thrown in prison. While in prison, he helps a couple guys. So in prison, he's still looking to help people. And there's a baker and a butler that Pharaoh had thrown in prison, and he literally helps these guys Well, one of them really, I guess. But he helps these guys, and he's like, hey, could you please just remember me when you get out of prison? And one of these guys actually gets help by Joseph, and then he gets out of prison and moves on with his life and just completely forgets about Joseph. Doesn't say anything about him. And then Egypt, he ends up getting out of prison, and then he rises to number 2 in the kingdom to help Pharaoh. And then Egypt goes through this horrible famine, and through Joseph's help and guidance, Egypt does the right thing and stores up a bunch of food and supplies so they don't suffer from the famine. But then his brothers need help, and they come to Pharaoh, and they come to Joseph, not knowing who he is, needing help. What would your attitude be towards those brothers? What would your attitude be? I mean, wouldn't you have some bitterness built up there? Wouldn't you be like, hey, I'm on top now. It's time for you to suffer. But look at what Joseph says in Genesis chapter number 45. After going through all of that, which was caused by his brothers, and here his brothers come to him, not knowing who he is at this point, thinking that he's probably dead, needing help from him. This is what he says. He could not hold back telling them who he was. In verse number 1 it says, "Then Joseph could not refrain himself before all them that stood by him and cried, 'Cause every man to go out from me.'" He's basically, Pharaoh's, he's like the vice president at this point, all right? "And there stood no man with him, while Joseph made himself known unto his brethren." So he tells his brothers who he is. "And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard. And Joseph said unto his brethren," his brothers, "I am Joseph. Doth my father yet live?" And his brethren could not answer him, for they were troubled at his presence. I mean, do you think? They were troubled at his presence because what is the first thing that you think that they're thinking about? Here's this man with all this power, and they're probably thinking like, we're done. We're over at this point. Look at verse number 4. "And Joseph said unto his brethren, Come near to me, I pray you. And they came near, and he said, I am Joseph, your brother, whom ye sold into Egypt. Now he calms them down right away. Now therefore be not grieved, nor angry with yourselves, that ye sold me hither. For God did send me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be earing nor harvest." He's saying, we're only 2 years into this 7-year famine. There's 5 years left. And he's like, God sent me here, and God sent me before you, verse 7, to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and a lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Look, throughout Joseph's whole life, if you go and you read the 5 chapters before Genesis 45, you will find out. You know what you will find? Throughout Joseph's whole life, when he's going through these negative situations, what did he do? Well, you know what? He did the right thing. He kept serving. He kept his faith in God. And you just thought, look, do you think he knew what God was doing when he was in prison? Do you think he knew what God was doing when he was in Potiphar's house as a slave after his brothers, sold him? Do you think he knew what God was doing when he was thrown, down a well? Do you think that he knew what God was doing then? He had no idea. But he just kept doing the right thing. He kept his faith in God. And he just said to himself, God must be doing something here. And in Genesis 45, what you're seeing is when Joseph has found out what God was doing. But he never stopped doing the right thing. And he also never thought that he deserved some great thing. Otherwise, you would have a man in prison who was just wallowing in self-pity. Because did Joseph deserve? Think about this for a second. Think about this for a second. He knew he deserved nothing. How do I know that? Look, it's even worse. It's even bigger than you deserve nothing, because Joseph didn't deserve to be in prison. Sometimes you will get what you don't deserve in a negative way. One of the most valuable things that my parents taught me, and this is one of the things my parents said to me over and over throughout my life, is that life is not fair. What a powerful thing that we need to learn as individuals. Because look, life isn't fair. Was it fair that Joseph was in prison? That wasn't fair at all. But he kept doing the right thing. I mean, for us, in our lives, look, something negative happens to us, we just need to keep our faith in God. We just need to keep coming to church, keep living our Christian life, keep our spiritual life about us. Look, if your spiritual life is dependent on everything being positive and you getting everything that you deserve all the time, you're doomed in your Christian life. Because you're not going to get, the things that you deserve. And many times, that's a good thing. But the point is, a lot of times, negative things are going to happen to you that you didn't deserve. Maybe somebody falsely accuses you. You didn't deserve that. Well, look, it happens. Other people cannot control your attitude. And this is how Joseph was able to go back to Genesis chapter number 39. This is how Joseph was able to pull positive out of a negative, or to see the positive that was always there, by the way, in the negative. But what if Joseph was bitter? What if he was sitting in prison and he was bitter towards his brothers? What if he was bitter towards Potiphar's wife? When he's like, that woman, that wicked woman. I mean, yeah, she is a wicked woman to do something like that and throw someone in prison for a false accusation. But you know what? He would have rotted in prison if that's what would have happened. Instead, you know what? He rose to the top in prison. You can be at the top in prison? Well, apparently, look at Genesis 39, verse number 22. He rose to the top in every single situation that he was put in, no matter how negative it was. Look at verse 22 of Genesis chapter 39. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison. And whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him. And that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Joseph never lost his faith, and he ended up in charge even in the prison. Negativity never overtook him. He was always able to see the positive. How can we apply that today? How can we apply that today? Because look, I think that today there's a lot of people that are pushing a lot of negative stuff on just us today. As we go out and we live our lives in this world, I read an article this week, and I want to do another thought experiment with you. I want you to picture, I'm going to give you some things, just as I listed Joseph's circumstances. I pulled out some points from this article that I read. It was a article talking about the economic times that we're in today. And I want to read you these things. And I want you to think about every single one of these points that I'm making. And I want you to think about, what kind of feelings am I having right now? So let me just read you some. This is kind of a picture of where we are economically today versus where we were 40 years ago or 30 years ago. All right? So, and look, and if you fall into this category here, I'm not beating up on you. I'm just pointing out this is where we are today. All right? So I'm trying to paint a picture for you. And look, you'll agree with this because we're all living this right now. All right? But you know how I like all-time highs and all-time lows in trends and things like that. But here's this picture I want to paint for you. So as I read these things, I want you to think about every single thing that I'm telling you. And I want you to think about, how do I feel about that? And I want you to think about just your attitude towards what I'm saying. So let me paint a picture for you. Thought experiment number 2. 50% of people, this is an all-time high. Over the last 3 or 4 years, this number hasn't changed much, but 50% of people under 30 live with their parents. Young adults, 18 to 30. It's about 50%, okay? That is the highest, and again, if that's you, I'm not against you or whatever, that's where the country is today. That number, that percentage, is the highest since the Great Depression. It's an all-time high since the Great Depression of the late 20s, early 30s. You say, well, Pastor, you just preached that young ladies should live at home. Yeah, but young ladies should be getting married young, ideally. But guess what? If I asked you, are there more young men that live at home or more young ladies that live at home, what would you guess? It's 2-to-1 young men that live with their parents at this point, okay? So it's double for young men. So that's the highest since the Great Depression. And it's economic reasons is why that's happening, okay? Because it's obviously cheaper to live, in a household with other people where, you can split those bills, right? Here's some more stats for you. We're talking about economic times today, and you're taking this in and you're telling me how, you're thinking about how you feel about this. 1 out of 10 today, as far as houses go, kind of the American dream is buying your first home. That's always kind of been something that is the American dream. 1 out of 10 new homes built are under 1,400 square feet today. All right, so there's very few, let me translate that. There's very few smaller, what we would call starter homes being built today. All right, and look, I was actually just recently, for, part of helping somebody in the ministry, I was recently looking for, apartments and rent and things like this. I was shocked how much rent is. I was like, what in the world? I told him, I hadn't looked at this type of thing for a while, but it was very surprising. All right, but look, 1 out of 10, meaning not very many, the vast minority of houses are smaller starter level homes. All right, in 1970, it was 4 out of 10. Nearly half the houses built were these smaller starter level homes. Okay, they're just not building that many of the starter level homes anymore. And we could debate why that is, but it's just not happening. All right. Well, they say, they need to build more homes. They need to go out and they need to build more homes. They need to build more starter homes. And look, they're building homes that I can see. They're building homes. But here's another negative thing, or another thing that came out of this article. It's more expensive now to own than to rent. And I saw that just yesterday looking at these things. In many markets, all right? I can't say that over every market, but in general, it's more expensive to own a home than to rent. The median age of a U.S. home buyer in 1981 was 31 years old. The median age, meaning this is the median is an average is a decent way of describing it. The median age of a U.S. home buyer in 2019, or modern times, is 47 years old. So what does that mean? That means that it's trending towards you just have to wait longer and longer and longer to buy your first home. You say, well, why don't they build more homes? Why don't they build more homes? Well, here's another one. There's an 81% shortage in labor to build new homes. 81%. That means, you say, what does that mean, Pastor? That means if a company is looking for 10 people, they can find 2. That's what an 81% shortage means. Meaning there's no one to build the houses. There's no one to build the less than 1,400 square foot houses. Even if they wanted, even if a company said, hey, we're going to start building 1,200 square foot houses, there's nobody. This is why I've often said, and we even talked about this on, I think it was Sunday night. We talked about this, and I believe this from the top of my head to the tip of my toes, that if you ever heard of the baby boomer generation, it's pretty clear that they were at the top of the hill. And things, as far as statistics, how expensive things are, how much people earn, how well retirements are structured in the United States, it's kind of heading downhill from that generation. It's pretty clear. They had the best environment, they had the best wages, they had the best prices, best interest rates, in the late 80s, 90s. Basically from 2000, from 95 to 2015 or whatever, interest rates were basically zero. There is a really good environment, all right? Now, let me ask you a question. As I just painted that picture, you're like, now I'm depressed. Thank you. But as I just painted that picture for you, what were you thinking? What were you thinking there? Was there anything positive in what I just said? When I was sitting there thinking that, when I was sitting there telling you all those details, were you like, it's tough out there. I know. Is that your attitude? Everything's expensive. Can't afford anything out there. If that was your attitude, you failed that thought experiment. And you have the problem of what I am preaching against this morning. Right? Look, there was one thing that I said there that was very positive, which is what? There's an 81% shortage in people that companies can find. In what? Skilled labor is what they will constantly say. There's 81% shortage in skilled labor. That means there's a lot of opportunity out there. So you should have heard that message that I just went through, and you should have been like, that's a lot of opportunity for me, because somebody's got to build these houses. Somebody's got to wire these places. Somebody's got to, run the plumbing. Somebody's got to build the infrastructure for this society. Somebody's got to do this stuff. And that's huge opportunity. But the point is this. The point is this, as things are changing, and look, let me just say this. I don't want to get it off on the rabbit trail on the artificial intelligence stuff, but there was an 81% shortage. The reason that shortage came along was because this massive group of people in the population retired. That was the baby boomer generation. They retired and they left a massive hole in the labor force. They left this massive hole and nobody filled it. Why? You say, where are all the kids? They all went to college. They all went to college. Here's another thing I looked at in the last week, and I've looked at this tons in my life, but I refreshed myself last week. You can go and I was looking at a certain college degree. I'll just tell you what it was. It was accounting. I was looking at a certain college degree and the kind of job that you get from an accounting degree. And I was like, all right, so how many jobs out there require a bachelor's degree in accounting? And what do those jobs pay? Well, about 80% of the jobs out there require a bachelor's degree in accounting unless they're specific low entry-level jobs. Some of them, associate's degree, whatever. But the point is, they all want this bachelor's degree. And most of the entry-level ones that I found started out at about $25 an hour. What kind of moron is making that decision? What kind of idiot's going to go to school for 6 years and pay $100,000 for a job for the money that they could make at McDonald's? Who's making this kind of decision? And yet, there's an 81% shortage over here. They're begging for people over here. They're begging for people to start businesses over there. That's the positive in that huge negative. They're begging for anyone that knows anything. Skilled labor. And look, as AI comes along, some things are going to change. Some jobs are going to shift. What it's going to come down to is, there's just going to be a bigger and bigger shortage of skilled labor because of AI. Because people are going to have less and less skills as they start to rely on this crutch to do things. That's exactly what's going to happen. There's a future prediction for you. Let me ask you a question. Once you got Google Maps on your phone, did you get better at reading a map? No, you forgot how to read a map. Did you get better at learning how to use a compass? Everyone's like, what's a compass? No, literally when these things are taking over things, it removes that skill. So that 81% started by a bunch of people that retired, but it's going to get worse and worse and worse. Again, opportunity. Opportunity. Skill, look, it's going to be a major shift in our society. Turn to 1 Timothy chapter number 4. But look, this exercise that we're going through this morning is impossible to win if you have the wrong attitude. That's what I'm getting at this morning. 1 Timothy chapter number 4. 1 Timothy chapter number 4. Because look, there will always be something negative to focus on. You could have been like, yeah, there's not enough houses. Yeah, there's not, it's too expensive out there. You could have just been like, you could have just stacked up the lemons in your mind to the point where you became non-functional. And that's what most people do, which is another huge advantage. Most people are just carrying a big bag of lemons around, and it weights them down. And look, unless you have the attitude that I'm talking about, you will always quit. You will always stop at some point. And the ultimate application of this is your Christian life. Turn to 1 Timothy chapter number 4. Because look, there are always going to be people out there telling you why you shouldn't pursue your faith. Why you should stop pursuing your Christian life. Why you should quit on God. Why you should blame God for your problems. There's going to be no shortage of people out there that are going to be telling you those types of things. Look at 1 Timothy 4, look at verse number 1. The Bible says, now the Spirit speaketh expressly. You know what that means? That means the Holy Spirit is like imploring with you. It is saying, listen to me. That in the latter times, some shall depart from the faith. Why? The Bible's saying in the latter times, some are going to depart from the faith. It doesn't mean like if you depart from the faith, you're not unsaved. If you believed on the Lord Jesus Christ, you're saved, but you can quit the Christian life. You can quit coming to church. You can quit soul winning. You can quit on God. He won't quit on you, but you can quit on Him. And some people departed from the faith. Why? Giving heed to seducing spirits. You know what those seducing spirits are? Those are those people that are constantly in your ear like, why are you doing that? Why are you spending so... You go to church 3 times a week? What? What are you wasting your time doing that for? You go walk around on the street? You go walk around the street with a Bible? What? You're going to go out and tell people? I mean, if people don't want to hear what you have to say, you know what that is? That's seducing spirits trying to put doubts in you, and there will never be a shortage of those people. Ever. Why are you doing this? Seducing you. Injecting doubt into you. If you're smart, you'll manage those people in your life. Husbands, fathers, if you're smart, you will manage those influences on your family. Because there will be no shortage of those people that want to drag your children away, try to inject wicked thoughts into them, try to inject worldly things into them, try to inject just seducing thoughts into them. This is the danger of coming to church and having your kids hear the Bible preached and having, all these standards preached at you and then going and living a worldly life during the week. You're the seducing spirit if that's what you're doing. You're going to pull them away from that faith. I had a philosophical discussion with my kids this morning on the way to church about Charlie Brown. I used to watch Charlie Brown cartoons when I was a kid, and then there was a comic strip called Peanuts. How many of you know Charlie Brown well, right? Charlie Brown, and the kids were talking about, is it a good cartoon or is it a not good cartoon? But what I'm getting at here in 1 Timothy chapter number 4 is that there's going to be plenty of people trying to inject doubt in you. You need to have enough confidence in your Christian life to do the right thing no matter what. And the problem with Charlie Brown is he had no confidence. And one of the kids, who will remain nameless, identified something that was not good about the cartoon. He was like, all these people are just picking on this kid, and, he can't get it right, and they're just beating this kid down. And, Charlie Brown, he's, losing all the baseball games. He can't kick a football. And, why did he keep trying to kick the football? You ever ask yourself that? But he's the butt of every joke. He gets everything wrong. He picks out the wrong Christmas tree. He can't get anything right. I was telling the kids, you know who you wanted to be? You want to be Snoopy. You want to be Snoopy. Now, there's a confident individual right there. Snoopy. What is he? He's a dog, but he's also a World War I fighter pilot. Whatever, You know what I'm saying? That is a confident individual. Many times it was Snoopy that came in and saved the day. It was Snoopy that came in and fixed up Charlie Brown's, lame Christmas tree. Snoopy, what did Snoopy have? Snoopy, he had confidence. He had confidence. But 1 Timothy chapter number 4 points out what one of my kids pointed out is, there's all these people beating on Charlie Brown and bullying Charlie Brown and just being nasty to Charlie Brown and just, pointing out every single little mistake that he made. But here's the point. Yes, that was wrong, but those people are out there. Those people are out there. And there are those bad people out there. Look, they shouldn't do those things, but they're out there. Charlie Brown, he had a good heart, but he had no confidence. He had no confidence. Even the kid sucking his thumb, carrying the blanket around, had more confidence than Charlie Brown. Even the kid who had the dirt around him all the time, what was that kid's name? Pigpen. Even he was more confident. He had a dirt cloud following him around. Charlie Brown had no confidence at all. Look, you need to have some confidence in your Christian life. So when people do good things or bad things outside of your circle, who cares? I'm just going to continue to do the good thing. I'm going to continue to do the right thing. The problem is, I'm trying to give you the right mindset this morning. So you can even have a chance at what we're talking about. And look, it takes practice. It doesn't just take hearing a sermon and then forgetting about the sermon before you walk out the door. Turn to Proverbs chapter number 17. You need to continue to do the right thing. That is on you. Don't give that power. Look, don't give that power to do the right thing to somebody else. It's up to you to do the right thing. God is looking to you to do the right thing. God is telling you what to do in the Bible, and He's saying, hey, you do it, no matter what other people do. And then you need to realize that you deserve nothing. And maybe you'll get some negative things that you didn't even deserve. But if you realize those two things, you won't be able to be seduced by any spirit out there. Look at Proverbs chapter number 17. Proverbs 17, verse number 22. It's the verse of the week. Now maybe you understand why this is the verse of the week. The Bible says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. Look, there is always a positive hidden amongst that negative. There is always a positive in there. And guess what? You don't even have to know what that positive is. You just have to continue to do the right thing, and you have to know that you deserve nothing. And look, you will eventually be able to look back and say, yeah, I see what God was doing there. As long as you keep doing the right thing, you never charge God, you realize, I deserve nothing, Lord. I don't even deserve the breath that I have. If you want to talk about what we really deserve, you really deserve to go to hell. You didn't deserve to be saved. You deserve nothing. If you keep that attitude, eventually you will see that glass of lemonade in that bucket of lemons. God will show it to you, just as He showed it to Joseph. Joseph didn't know for years what God was doing. But see, the status quo today is just to become a victim of circumstance. That's what we see in our society today. It's just to blame everybody else. There's always a reason for failure. See, no one ever quits anything. No one ever quits anything and then says, yeah, I quit that because I'm a quitter. Why did you quit that, pursuing that goal that you had? I'm a loser. That's why. I can't accomplish anything. What do? They're like, no, this guy over here, or I found out that this and that and this and that, and somebody else. They're just, look, there will always be some elaborate reason that you could find on why there was no other way but to quit. Just continue doing the right thing, realize that you deserve nothing, and eventually God will show you the positive that you can pull out of that negative. But attitude's everything. And the Bible tells us that keep that attitude. A broken spirit. Think of those words in the Bible. That's somebody that's just, they're unstable. They're going to be unstable because it drieth up the bones, meaning they just quit everything. There's always a positive that we could see. Even if you don't see it today, you will be able to look back and see it as long as you keep the right attitude in your life, just like Joseph did. Let's bow our heads.